Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Gender Studies lecture series on Nearpeer. I'm your instructor Abrar Ahmed. I have also taught political science lecture series on Nearpeer. If you have that as an optional course, and you might want to check that course as well. So as far as gender studies is concerned, we're going to start by having this first lecture, sort of a very brief overview in terms of what are the most fundamental concepts and some of the most repetitive and basic ideas that are constantly we see constantly during the course of gender studies. So उन basic definitions को clarity के लिए आपके लिए ये वीडियो जो है वो पेश की जा रही है. तो सबसे पहले जो आप सबसे common terminology gender studies के कोर्स में देखेंगे वो है patriarchy. Patriarchy जिसको उर्दू में पिदरशाही कहा जाता है is a system in which men have higher political power, higher social power or higher economic power. So basically, when men have more power in the society as compared to women, when the unequal power dynamic between the two genders favors men, this system is called patriarchy. So you can refer that, for instance, जब आप बात करते हैं patriarchal society, तो you are basically saying that in society, men generally tend to be dominant in various ways. Similarly, when you say politics is patriarchal, you say that सियासत जो है वो उसमें मर्दों की ज़्यादा चलती है. Similarly, you can say this about anything generally. So हम जब patriarchy refer करते हैं तो अपने course में it will come up constantly and regularly because this course is about dissecting what patriarchy is, how it manifests itself in various ways, what is the origin of patriarchy, and how do the modern gender studies and feminist struggles seek or are attempting to demolishing it. Because patriarchy favors one sex or one gender over the other, this inherently is used in a negative connotation. So इसका मतलब कि patriarchy is something that is not desirable, and during the whole course of gender studies we will see various ways in which this can be changed. Second important terminology which might not recur repeatedly, but something for conceptual clarity, as there is a patriarchy, there is a concept called matriarchy. It is a system in which women hold the power. But through the course of history, we've seen that matriarchy has never existed, or it has partially existed. There were ancient tribes, या कुछ जगह ऐसे historically exist करती थी जहाँ पे women जो है had more power than men. So female matriarch was female leader जो है वो हुआ करती थी. But over the course of history, we've generally seen, at least since the dawn of the agricultural revolution, that men generally have dominated the society, politics, culture, economics largely, and matriarchy has not existed. The goal of gender studies या gender discourse जो है और जो feminist struggles हैं, their goal is not to establish a matriarchy. Their goal is not to demolish patriarchy and replace matriarchy as a substitute. Their goal is rather equality, and matriarchy does not equal equality. So this is something that is not desirable. The third important concept is the concept of biological sex. अब इसके अंदर एक बहुत important distinction जरूरी है कि what is a biological sex? This is something that is assigned at birth and it depends upon your genital organs and your chromosomal makeup. Biology students generally know there is a fixed chromosomal makeup for boys and there's a fixed chromosomal makeup for girls, which is determined by genetic transmission. और ये इसको हम कहते हैं biological sex. तो based on these two important characteristics आपका biological sex determine होता है. और जब भी आप अपना किसी फॉर्म पे अपना sex identify करते हैं तो आप इन मेल और फीमेल, तो ये वो वाले लेबल्स हैं, इन लेबल्स को आप यूज करके सेक्स के साथ एसोसिएट करते हैं. और there is a third category, if you don't fall within these two, there's this category of intersex as well. Gender, on the other hand, pertains to the gender roles, and gender is something which are the behaviors and attitudes that are expected from a particular sex. So, for instance, male sex is required to act in a certain way, and female sex is required to act in a certain way. So, the way they are expected to act, behave, dress, talk, think all of these constitute gender roles. इसीलिए अमूमी तौर पे ये कहा जाता है there's a term called prescribed gender roles, that is to say that gender roles सोसाइटी ने प्रिस्क्राइब किए होते हैं, इंसान अपनी चॉइस से नहीं खुद डिटरमिन करता, वो सोसाइटी एक्सपेक्ट करती है और इन्फोर्स करती है कि ये जेंडर रोल्स हर सेक्स अपना अपना जेंडर रोल फॉलो करे, एंड इफ दे डोंट फॉलो इट दे आर फॉलोड बाय penalties in the form of social condemnation or exclusion from society, social censure. So there is now a fundamental difference between biological sex and gender. So sex is biological, that is inherently determined, something you have no control over, and gender is social and cultural because you over the course of time or over the course of history ये develop हुए हैं. And since gender is cultural or social, this means कि gender roles different societies में different होंगे. So it really depends on which society, which culture you belong to. So gender roles in Pakistan, for instance, are going to be different from gender roles in the US. It is considered okay, for instance, in US for the leaders for men to cry in open spaces. That is something not seen abhorrent now. So for instance, when Barack Obama gave his speech on one of the mass shootings in schools, he had tears in his eyes and it was considered completely acceptable. So similarly, in some very patriarchal, conventional, traditional cultures, it is not considered okay for men to cry in public spaces. So that means कि gender roles चूंकि defined societies और cultures करती हैं और हर society का culture different होता है, hence gender roles भी culture to culture vary करते हैं. However, each society, each culture has its own prescribed set of expectations, prescribed norms, prescribed values कि ये particular biological sex is expected to behave like this and this biological sex is expected to behave like that. Then there is this concept of gender identity, which means how you feel from the inside about your gender. So one is that एक आपका biological sex जो पैदा होते आपको मिल गया था because of your organs and your chromosomal makeup. That is your assigned biological sex. Second is what society, based on that sex, what society expects from you कि आपको कैसे behave करना चाहिए, आपको किस तरह के कपड़े पहनने चाहिए, आपको किस तरह के behavior कैसा होना चाहिए, आपका attitude क्या होना चाहिए. और तीसरी एक चीज है कि आप अंदर से क्या feel करते हैं कि how do you want to react, and that is the whole this concept of modern concept of gender being fluid, that society expects females or males to act certain ways, but people oftentimes do not want to associate with that kind of behavior. So that reflects difference in their gender identity. Then there's this concept of gender socialization. This means that society, and again it's connected to the concept of gender roles, nothing different, but as very important terminology that is going to be very repetitive, that हम लड़कों को लड़कियों को डिफरेंट तरीके से अपने सोसाइटी में ग्रूम करते हैं. सोशलाइजेशन का जनरली मतलब होता है कि सिखाना, किस तरीके से लर्न करते हैं लोग अपनी बिहेवियर्स को. सो जेंडर सोशलाइजेशन का मतलब है कि बचपन से लड़कों को जिस तरीके की ट्रेनिंग दी जाती है. सो फॉर इंस्टेंस हाउ देयर लेबल्स लाइक men don't cry, big boys don't cry, and then giving them action figures to play with, उनको sports में encourage करना, encouraging them with authoritative positions or specific colors that boys can wear. तो ये एक खास किस्म का mindset develop करता है. तो हम उन्हें gender roles में ट्रांसफॉर्म करते हैं बचपन से लेकर. दिस इज द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ जेंडर सोशलाइजेशन. ऑल्टरनेटिवली फीमेल्स को डिफरेंट तरीके से कहा जाएगा. उन्हें जो है वो they would not play generally with action figures. They would be expected to play with doll houses. They will be expected to care for others. They will be expected to be emotional. They will be expected to be to look nice, to look beautiful, and not expected to be very athletic. And their sports will be more feminine in that sense. तो हम society, culture, society के institutions लड़कों लड़कियों को डिफरेंट तरीके से सोशलाइज करके उनको ग्रूम करके डिफरेंट जेंडर रोल्स में ढालते हैं. दिस इज व्हाट जेंडर सोशलाइजेशन मीन्स. Then there's this concept of objectification that is very going to be recurrent in this course. Objectification, as the word suggests, के object से निकला है कि जब आप किसी को इंसान की बजाय एक ऑब्जेक्ट समझो और उसको एक ऑब्जेक्ट की तरह ट्रीट करो. And then there are various ways in which you can do that. One is कि आप उसकी ऑटोनॉमी को, उसकी आजादी को, उसके अपने माइंडेडनेस को, उसकी अपनी राय को अगर वैल्यू नहीं करते, इट मीन्स दैट यू आर नॉट कंसिडरिंग द अदर पर्सन एज अ कंप्लीट ह्यूमन बीइंग एंड रिड्यूसिंग देम टू मेयर ऑब्जेक्ट्स विच यू कैन यूज एज यू डीम फिट. तो इस